Man. You know, why does Hypno-Shroom suck so much? It's been in both PvZ1 and PvZ2, yet somehow seems to be pretty meh in both of them. Hey look, a scrapper. That'll be helpful. Actually, even in mods, I can't actually think of a single time they've been an actually good and feasible plant. They just sorta suck in most cases. They have a few niches, but usually don't use them all too much. I wonder why. Is that another two scrappers? That close to each other? Great, thank you, game. That's not the original scrapper, is it? Okay, for scrappers, I can barely find any items, and have found more scrappers than goddamn items. What feasible use could I have for 4 of these things? Well, the game seems to hate me. I guess I should probably just get back to making a video then. I wonder what topic I should work on. Wait, okay, so, Gimmicky Plants. These plants tend to be flashy, interesting, but ultimately not very strong nor practical. Generally, the more the plant does, or the more unique it is, the more it tends to become questionable or weak. Resting its gimmick as a wall is incredibly terrible. Mana-Shroom is just an absolute joke. Spore-Shroom replicates in killing zombies and tends to be less than helpful. Tomb Tangle is just everything, and so on. Pretty consistently, the strongest plants are the one with simpler effects, with a few rare exceptions. There are some plants still that I'd say are clearly gimmicky and still work, however. Stuff like Electric Current in a lot of mods, but these are the rarity, not the rule. But that does seem to imply that there are some things that can be done to reverse a trend, right? We'll cover that as we go along. But first, I want to do some basic defining of some key traits of plants in general, which will help us define how these plants become gimmicky, and what traits are actually important to a plant. So, without further ado, what makes a plant? In general, it is important to remember what plants do. They help you defend your house. Sunflowers produce sun, pea shooters shoot peas, and walnuts hold off zombies. These plants all do a wide variety of tasks, but they all fundamentally do the same thing. They help ensure that the zombies can't reach you. Sunflowers produce sun, so you can plant down more plants. Walnuts keep zombies in place so they can't approach. Pea shooters do a silly little dance and scare zombies away. It's that simple. In the end, every plant has to help in this way. Most directly are these 3 cores: damage, slowing, and producing. While others do exist, these are the main 3 things that plants should try to do. In general, plants that stay to these core concepts tend to be very strong, and usually simple to play with. Instas, for instance, generally fall into damaging and slowing categories. Wintermelon, one of the strongest plants in the game, falls into both damage and slowing, which is why it's such a strong plant in general. The closer a plant sticks to these, generally, the better it is. Now, not every plant is so simple. A lot of plants tend to have added gimmicks, which make them more complicated. A plant like Potato Mine is specialized for the early game, while a plant like Cherry Bomb is specialized for the mid game. Some gimmicks do make a plant stronger, but some gimmicks also tend to stray away from the core concepts. They tend to add ifs to a plant's effect, specifically. Take, say, Citron. Citron fires some huge projectiles that are among the strongest in the game. However, it fires these very slowly, in a realm of 10 seconds each. This renders Citron weak to swarms, and very susceptible to wasting damage for overkill. These add if cases, where Citron is now useful if there are targets that can take the full damage, and if there isn't a huge swarm. This is a simpler version, but the further away a plant goes from the main cores, the gimmickier it becomes. The longer the series of ifs, the harder it becomes to use. Sometimes it doesn't even need many ifs, just one big one can really be enough. Gimmicky plants in general are harder to use and tend to be weaker, because they are needed to fulfill so many conditions to perform well. Plants like Repeater are consistently strong in mods, and plants like Winter are so simple that often complexity has to be added to make them seem reasonable with the rest of the cast. Now with that said, I want to specifically cover what makes a gimmicky plant bad. There are a few key ways that gimmicky plants tend to start failing. Let's cover them then, and how they can be fixed individually, shall we? The first main potential issue with gimmicky plants is that the ifs are far too difficult to work around. These plants generally have decently helpful abilities, but they're extremely limited, or need things to happen which are rare or otherwise unlikely. This applies to a large chunk of plants you would consider gimmicky. For instance, Hypno-Shroom. He can deal the equivalent of 1,100 damage to zombies, but can only target bucketheads and knights, plus Poncho Zombie with a grate. This makes Hypno-Shroom good if the level uses a lot of buggers and knights, but the plant is entirely reliant on that. Other plants may have this issue, but in a less obvious way. See Spore-Shroom, for instance. Spore-Shroom is good if the zombies get close, if the zombie isn't currently in range of eating a plant, if the zombie after is a fair distance away from another plant, and if the field is mostly clear of plants. This is a huge list of ifs for it to use its main ability, duplicating itself by killing a zombie, and ensures a plant remains very gimmicky, and very difficult to find a real use for in most cases. This is a particularly hard issue to fix, especially in retrospect, as this is usually caused by the core idea of a plant. Take Spore-Shroom for instance. These ifs are caused because of its ability, and you will need to change how that ability works for this to be fixed. For Spore, this could include having the summoned Spore-Shroom be closer to Spore itself, or having a knockback on spawnage, or something equal like that. You can also attempt it to turn into a wall plant if you want, perhaps with a similar mechanic to Red Stinger. Another way is simply to expand the circumstances these ifs are used for. Plants like Magnet could target more zombies, such as in PvZ1. The second main issue is lack of payoff. The ifs may not be too hard to pull off themselves, but the resultant plant is not strong enough for this to be worthwhile. An example of this is something like Hypno-Shroom. Hypno-Shroom will hypnotize one zombie in its lane, which is helpful under the if that there is something else in the lane that needs damage, or there is a single strong target. But it's a plant that costs way too much sun, especially in PvZ2, where it costs 125 for some unholy reason, where other plants like Chili Bean have the same recharge and only cost 50, with an alternate, easier to use ability. Another example includes plants whose payoff may not even be all too helpful to begin with. Think of Aloe here. Healing a wall when under 50% HP is not a situation that is rare, but Aloe heals very slowly, and more notably, takes up an entire tile on the lawn. Arguably one of the strongest tiles too, as a plant like Bong Choy can do tons of damage behind a wall. Aloe needs to do a lot more than what it currently does to make itself become good or even viable. A third main issue is that the plant's role is far too removed from a basic cause. Plants like this struggle to help and tend to not find a way to actually help a player win. In an extreme case, this can include plants like Intensive Carrots, which revives plants which usually does not contribute to winning a level, or a plant like Gold Magnet or Marigold in PvZ1. That's not to say all plants like this are necessarily bad, but you need to actively go out of your way to find a use for them. On a lesser scale, this can include plants like Garlic. Redirectors are an interesting category of plants that can sometimes struggle to find much use, as inherently, it's pretty hard to justify a plant like Garlic, as redirecting isn't inherently useful unless you specifically plan for it. That's not to say redirectors are worthless, they can be quite strong, but they require a lot of investment elsewhere for an ability that does not natively help you out. This isn't really solvable as an issue, unlike the others. This is a core issue with the design of plants, so it's not at all truly avoidable. The main solution is probably highlighting the units that they work well with, and ensuring those unit combos are strong. This requires levels, other plants, and a lot of extra work. It's not exactly great though, and often just results in more plants being added than really end up being useful. At least, if you consider this a real issue. The final big issue I'd say is a matter of consistency. The ifs are unreliable and not things the player has any true control over. This is rarely the only issue a plant can have, but it tends to be a big one. Example plants with this issue include Spore-Shroom needing certain zombie placements, Intensive Carrot requiring valuable plants to die, or plants like Citron requiring support to clear up hordes of zombies. This is more of an inherent issue of these ideas, but you may be able to simplify these plants, if you must, so they have more consistency, or otherwise make it so the short bursts of usage they have for the ifs become very valuable, and worth keeping an eye out for whenever applicable. This does sometimes result in these plants being too powerful, if the if in question is available for too long, but this very rarely actually happens in practice from my experience. These are all issues that tend to apply to any truly gimmicky plant. In fact, you can see a lot of these in plants I wouldn't call gimmicky at all, such as Cherry Bomb to an extent. However, when a plant tends to have a lot of these, it starts to become more and more gimmicky. So either a simplification or an increase in power is needed so it keeps succeeding. It's also why there are so often gimmicky plants that are too weak in game. Gimmicky plants tend to suck because they are high risk, low reward so often, when they need to be high risk, high rewards. And while a few can reach this point sometimes, they rarely matter, leaving most plants like this worthless, near worthless, or inferior to the simpler plants. So, there's one more question to ask, I think. This is a problem. How? The answer, obviously, is that it's not. Look, this may be hard to understand here, but looking at some of these plants so linearly, as this plant is strong and this plant is weak, is such a poor way to look at plants in general. At the end of the day, power is objective. What you enjoy, what you like to play with, is subjective. And gimmicky plants are some of the best in the game for being enjoyable. They often have very unique effects, new abilities, encourage new, diverse and interesting playstyles, and if nothing else, add a challenge for players like me to work towards. If gimmicky plants were good, then I wouldn't have anything to do. Playing with the good plants is easy, simple, yes, but sometimes, playing truly optimally doesn't mean playing to win. It's proving you can win with anything. It's proving that these plans can work, that they aren't usably bad. They may be tricky to use, yes, but you can still win with them. And this crucial distinction, it makes the plans work. When I was getting into PZ2 properly, it wasn't because of vanilla. It was because of a mod called Eclise, nowadays known as Eclise Beta. I got my skills from playing that mod, but not in the traditional way. There were many plants in Eclise that were overlooked, but had insanely gimmicky abilities. Plants like Witch Hazel, Bowling Bulb, Toadstool. Ultimately, I decided to attempt to use each plant and figure out how to use them. These plants were gimmicky for the most part. Toadstool meleeed everything except a strange selection of targets. Witch Hazel attacked slowly, summoning soul tomatoes, and cost 400 stun each. Bowling Bulb was just Bowling Bulb. However, I over time figured out how to use each of these plants. Witch Hazel made great use of a more defensive strategy. Toadstool was an incredibly cheap melee attacker that did absurd amounts of damage if you figured out how to use it. And Bowling Bulb, well, I made a whole video on it, didn't I? Improving at PZ2 involves learning how these gimmicky plants work. Yes, bowling is never going to be better than just spamming repeat or P-pod. Yes, Witch Hazel will never be the solution to a particularly hard level. However, making them work? That's value enough. And to me, that's what gimmicky plants add to the game. They aren't there to be good. They are there to allow the player to improve. When people become better at the game, gimmicky plants are the answer. And you never know, you might find a new meta along the way. After all, Toadstool is one of the best plants in Eclise, and I was an early adopter. As a result, I think gimmicky plants not being worth it in a casual setting is totally fine. Yes, sometimes it's fun to go all out on a particularly difficult level, but those are rare levels in any mod, in vanilla, or anywhere really. You can have way too many levels like that, and they must be used sparingly to feel good to fight. So, having interesting and distinct plans as worse options? It works. Works far better than you may initially expect, if you let it. Anyways, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to gaming. Oh, wait, I forgot to say have a good one. Okay, bye.